Welcome to Life Stories, where the people who are supposed to protect you sometimes become the ones you need protection from. Imagine winning millions overnight, only to discover that the real prize isn't money, but finally seeing your family's true face. This is a story about betrayal, disguised as love, about boundaries drawn in ash and silence, and about what happens when a quiet woman decides she's done being quiet. If you've ever been the overlooked sibling, the responsible one, the person who was always told to give more, stay small, or keep the peace, this story will hit you where it hurts and where it heals. Because sometimes the biggest twist isn't the money, it's what the people around you do when they think you have something they want. So get comfortable. What you're about to hear isn't just about family, it's about freedom. Now let's begin. Callie Summers had never considered herself lucky. At 34, she lived alone in a modest third-floor walk-up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, working long hours as a marketing coordinator for a mid-size healthcare company that barely acknowledged her efforts. Her apartment was clean, if a little cramped, filled with secondhand furniture and framed thrift store prints that made it feel more like hers. She had student loans she still couldn't completely pay off, a car that rattled whenever the AC ran, and a sister who, since childhood, had been the sun around which their parents' world revolved. Blair, 2 years younger and infinitely more adored, had a life made of soft landings. When she quit school for a soul-searching sabbatical in Costa Rica, their parents funded it. When her boho chic online boutique failed, as it inevitably did, they refinanced their car to bail her out. And when Callie scraped together money for a graphing calculator in high school, Blair was getting new point shoes for her third dance class of the week. But Callie? She was the responsible one, the one who didn't ask, the one who learned early that needing too much made you a burden. So when she stopped for gas one Tuesday and bought a lottery ticket out of pure whim, she didn't tell anyone, not at first, not even when the numbers started matching. 1, then 2, then 6. She sat in her living room, spaghetti cooling in its bowl, blinking at the television like it had lost its mind. Her hands trembled as she tucked the ticket into a Ziploc bag and slid it between the pages of Pride and Prejudice, the only hardcover she owned. 2 days later, she stood in front of the Michigan State Lottery Commission, posing for pictures with a comically oversized check for $2.5 million. But the real check, the money, wasn't paper. It would be wired, after identity verification and tax deductions, directly to an account she'd opened that morning under a new trust name. Her financial advisor, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Thornton, had looked her squarely in the eye and said, "You've just entered shark-infested waters. Keep your circle tight. Tell no one until the money is in your hands." But Callie made one exception. Rachel, her best friend since freshman year of college, the person who'd sat with her in the ER after a panic attack and who always brought chocolate when she cried, deserved to know. Rachel wept with joy when Callie showed her the ticket and then, in typical Rachel fashion, made a spreadsheet of what Callie could do with the money. Pay off loans, buy a home, start over. Finally breathe. Still, Callie hesitated. Should she tell her family? Part of her still craved what she'd never had: approval, recognition, the sense that her success, though accidental, might finally earn her a place at the table. She told them over Sunday dinner, with pot roast on the stove and the sound of the neighbor's dog barking through the open window. Her mother dropped the ladle. Her father blinked. Blair walked in just as Callie said the words, "I won the lottery, $2.5 million." It took less than 3 minutes for the congratulations to shift into calculations. Blair's boutique had failed again, it turned out. She owed over $30,000 on credit cards and inventory loans. Their parents, without flinching, suggested that Callie cover it. $80,000 is a drop in the bucket, her father said between bites of roast. Family helps family. Callie's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "You didn't offer when I was drowning in debt." "That was different," her mother replied, tone clipped. "You've always been self-sufficient." "That wasn't self-sufficiency," Callie said quietly. "That was abandonment dressed up as character building." Her mother frowned. "Don't be dramatic." By dessert, Callie had said no. By morning, the calls had started. What came next felt like a siege. Texts, emails, voicemails, her mother crying, her father accusing, Blair playing the victim. They demanded a family financial meeting, to which Callie replied simply, no, she changed her locks. And that should have been the end of it. It wasn't. 4 days later, Callie returned to her apartment to grab a folder she'd left behind. The building was quiet. Nothing seemed off until she heard muffled voices inside. She opened her door to find her parents standing in her living room. Smoke curled from the trash can. Her mother held a lighter. Her father held the remnants of the lottery check, the oversized one from the publicity photos. It was already halfway burned. If you won't share, her father said coldly, then you don't get a penny. For a moment, the world went still. Then Callie laughed. It started as a disbelieving chuckle and grew into something wild, breathless. Her parents stared at her, confused. You idiots, she said, still laughing. Do you really think that's the real check? They stared. It's ceremonial, a prop. The real money is being transferred electronically. You just torched a souvenir. Silence. Then her mother whispered, You're lying. Callie pulled out her phone and opened the email from the Lottery Commission, showing the confirmation of funds being processed. I'm not, she said calmly, and you just broke into my home to destroy something that doesn't exist. Her father blustered, We were trying to help you see reason. No, you were trying to control me. Blair walked in then, holding a bag of Thai takeout. She froze. I didn't know they were going to do that, she said quickly. I thought we were just talking. Callie didn't answer her. She pointed to the door. All three of them stood stunned, as if the daughter they'd always overlooked had suddenly grown too bright to ignore. You need to leave, she said. And this time, no one argued. What would you do if the people you love tried to steal your future to preserve their own past? Is family still family when love becomes a transaction? Because as the ashes settled in the trash can, Callie knew one thing. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The silence after they left was heavier than their shouting had been. Callie sat on the edge of her sofa, her heart still hammering, staring at the scorched remains of what they thought was her fortune. A part of her wanted to cry, not for the fake check, not even for the betrayal, but for the little girl still buried inside her, the one who had spent her entire life trying to be enough for people who only saw her when she could give them something. That girl had just watched her parents light a match to her trust and smile while doing it. She spent the night at Rachel's, unable to sleep, barely speaking, except to say, They came into my home. They knew they were crossing a line, and they did it anyway. Rachel didn't push. She just poured wine, ordered Thai food, and stayed close. Callie stared out the window, the city lights blurring through her tired eyes. What do you do when the people who raised you turn into strangers? The next morning, Callie met with Miss Thornton and a lawyer, Miss Patterson, at a downtown law office with high ceilings and soft leather chairs that made her feel simultaneously powerful and small. Miss Patterson listened quietly as Callie explained what had happened. When Callie finished, her hands trembling slightly around her coffee, the lawyer leaned forward and said, This wasn't just a boundary violation, it was criminal. You're well within your rights to pursue charges. Callie blinked. I don't think I want to see them in court. I just want them gone. Out of my apartment, out of my inbox, out of my life. Then we start with a formal cease and desist letter, Miss Patterson said, and a restraining order if needed. Walking out of that office, Callie felt more steel in her spine than she ever had before. But the steel came with weight, guilt, grief, uncertainty. That night, she sat in her now empty apartment, her boxes half packed for the move across town. Every corner felt like it held a ghost of who she used to be. The woman who tolerated slights with a smile, who let love always come second to obligation. That version of her was being evicted too. But just as she was starting to imagine life without them, the phone rang. It was Aunt Diane. Callie hesitated, then answered. Her mother's sister had always been neutral ground, neither supportive nor cruel, simply present. I heard what happened, Diane said softly. Your mom called. She's been crying to everyone in the family. Callie exhaled. I'm sure she told her version. She did, but I've known her since we were kids. I can read between the lines. For the first time since the fire, Callie felt something thaw. She told Diane everything, not just about the lottery or the burning check, but the years before it, the years of being second place in her own family, the scholarships earned with no fanfare, the missed birthdays, the silent expectations. There was a pause. Then Diane said, I always saw it, the way they treated Blair like the centerpiece and you liked the furniture. I should have said something. I'm sorry I didn't. Callie didn't realize how much she needed to hear those words until she did. For once, someone had seen her and said it out loud. But the relief was short-lived. The next day, just as the movers arrived, she got another call, this time from her bank. We've had multiple attempts this morning to access the lottery account, the manager said calmly. All were blocked. But we thought you should know. Callie froze. How is that even possible? Someone tried calling in with your personal information. They knew your address, date of birth, even your security question. But they failed the final voice verification and we locked the account immediately. She hung up, stunned. Only a few people could have known that information, and all of them shared her last name. She called Miss Patterson immediately. They're not just trying to guilt me. They're trying to steal the money. Miss Patterson didn't sound surprised. Then I recommend we escalate. Let's move forward with full legal protections. Callie agreed. But that night, as she unpacked her things in the new apartment, paranoia crept in. Who could she trust? If her parents were willing to break into her home and burn a check, would they stop at just phone calls and emotional manipulation? Then came the letter. Handwritten, delivered by courier. No return address. She opened it cautiously. The handwriting was her father's. Callie, you've made your point. We were wrong to push you, but that money could still save this family. Do you really want to see your sister fail again? Do you want your mother to lose sleep every night? This doesn't have to be how it ends. Think about what you're doing. We only wanted what was best for you, what's best for all of us. It wasn't signed with love, just his name. She folded the letter slowly, slid it into a drawer, and stared out at the skyline. Her hands were shaking again, but not with fear, with fury. This wasn't just guilt anymore. It was gaslighting, rewritten as care. They were still trying to convince her that betrayal was protection. That control was love. She picked up her phone, opened the file where she had saved the security footage from her smart lock, and forwarded it to Miss Patterson. The timestamp showed them entering her apartment without permission. That was all the proof they'd need. Have you ever had to choose between your peace and your family's expectations? What did it cost you to finally choose yourself? Because the next move Callie made would change everything. Not just for her, but for the people who thought they still owned a piece of her life. The lawsuit never happened. Callie never stepped into a courtroom or raised her voice in front of a judge. In the end, it wasn't justice that settled things. It was silence. After sending the footage to Miss Patterson, Callie received confirmation that a restraining order had been filed and processed. Her parents, once the architects of every family holiday, every expectation, every guilt-soaked decision, were now legally required to stay away. There were no more letters, no more phone calls, just an emptiness where the chaos used to be. And strangely, it didn't feel like relief at first. It felt like grief. Grief for the family she had pretended to have, for the childhood she had rewritten in softer colors just to survive it, for the little girl who used to sit on the stairs at night, listening to her parents coo over Blair's latest ballet recital while her own math competition certificate sat folded in her backpack. She allowed herself to mourn. Therapy helped. So did Rachel. But mostly it was time like waves smoothing out the sharp edges of broken glass. Spring arrived early that year, warm and golden. Callie's new house, modest, safe, hers, stood in a quiet neighborhood where the neighbors smiled but didn't pry. She planted herbs on the windowsill and watched the light change across the kitchen floor each morning. Her student loans were gone. Her emergency fund was full. Her calendar no longer revolved around Sunday dinners that left her feeling invisible. But the part that surprised her most was the joy she found in giving, not to the people who had demanded it, but to those who never would. Through her foundation, she funded financial literacy programs at local community colleges. She paid off the debt of a single mother who had returned to school at 45. She helped a high school graduate attend university without taking out a single loan. Quietly, anonymously, she became the person she'd always needed growing up. Then, one afternoon in July, she got a text. "Hi, it's Blair. I hope this is still your number." Callie stared at the screen for a long time. For months, she hadn't heard a word from her sister, not since the day she watched their parents light a fire in Callie's living room. A part of her wanted to delete the message without reading the rest. But another part, the part still healing, still curious, opened it. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry, truly. I've been working at the cafe full time. No backup plan, no lifeline. It's been humbling and honestly good for me. I know I don't deserve a response, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. Not for anyone else this time, for me." Callie didn't respond immediately. She walked for an hour through her neighborhood thinking about the version of Blair she'd known and the one Blair was trying to become. Could people change when no one was looking? Could consequences, real ones, actually teach someone the value of what they once tried to take? That night, Callie sat on her porch and wrote back. "Thank you for your message. I'm glad you're finding your own way. I'm still working through everything, but I appreciate you reaching out. No promises. No reopening old wounds. Just acknowledgement." And sometimes that's enough. Weeks passed. Blair didn't push. She didn't beg. She just kept sending small updates every now and then. A photo of a latte she'd perfected, a snapshot of the cafe's staff board with her name listed as shift supervisor. There were no more mentions of money, no requests, no guilt, just a quiet effort to rebuild trust brick by brick. Then one Sunday in late September, Callie walked into the cafe. Blair was behind the counter, hair pulled back, apron smudged with espresso foam. She looked up and froze. "Hey," Callie said. Blair blinked, then gave a cautious smile. "Hey." Callie ordered a coffee. They didn't talk about the past, not right away. They talked about beans and milk temperatures and the playlist playing overhead. But as Callie reached for her drink, Blair leaned in and whispered, "I really did miss you." Callie looked at her sister, really looked at her, not as the golden child or the entitled one or the rival, just as Blair, human, flawed, trying. "I missed who I hoped you could be," Callie said softly. They stood in silence for a moment, then Blair nodded. "I'm working on becoming her." There was no dramatic hug, no tears, just two women starting again, cautiously, honestly. That night, Callie journaled for the first time in months. She wrote about forgiveness, not the kind handed out like candy to people who haven't earned it, but the kind that arrives when someone finally shows up differently. She didn't know what the future held for her relationship with Blair, but for the first time she was willing to find out, on her terms. Her parents never reached out again. Aunt Diane sent a card on Callie's birthday with a pressed flower inside and a handwritten note. "You're braver than all of us, kid. Don't forget that." Callie kept it on her fridge. The foundation grew. Her peace deepened. And the silence that once hurt now felt like space. Space she could finally fill with her own voice, her own choices, her own joy. She wasn't the woman who needed approval anymore. She was the woman who could build a life from ash and turn it into something quietly, irrevocably beautiful. What part of Callie's journey resonated with you the most? Comment 100 if this story touched your heart. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Share this story with a friend who needs a reminder that their worth is not up for negotiation. Thank you for watching Life Stories.